Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. We're back on Monday this week because I'm on the road for a screening today, which means we're using the dreaded estimates, but it doesn't really matter because this was the least in doubt outcome of maybe the entire summer so far. Toy Story 5, an absolute dominating performance domestically and worldwide. I have way too many charts to tell you about that film, and we're going to look at the rest of the top 10, including Obsession, which I know we talk about every week, but it's doing things that very few movies have done before, and it's on track for a few days this week at least to be the number one movie of the summer. Believe it or not. So we're going to check that out. But before we do, let's look at the top 10 for this past weekend. At number 1 was Toy Story 5, which had an estimated opening of $160 million. We'll see where the final numbers come in. It doesn't really matter, though. A huge opening for Pixar and for this franchise, and we're going to go way more into detail about that. Disclosure Day comes in second place. It brought in $17 million, so it fended off Obsession for the number 2 spot. But it dropped about 61.8% for a movie that was skewing older, especially on Father's Day weekend. You would expect a bigger hold than that, so it looks like a lot of the mixed word of mouth may have had an effect on its week 2 box office. It does not look like it's going to have long legs at the box office, especially during the summer season, but also not a complete catastrophe. It's kind of like the opening weekend, but not an impressive second weekend for Disclosure Day. In third place was Obsession with its customary 25% drop in its sixth weekend of release. It brought in another $14.2 million for a $215.8 million domestic total. Way more about that movie in a little bit. Backrooms is in fourth place. It dropped 36.5%, pretty far behind Obsession there at number 3. It brought in $7.3 million. It's at $175.1 million domestic. Scary Movie dropped another 52.8% to bring in $6.7 million. It's getting close to $100 million domestic. Masters of the Universe in its third weekend, finally putting up a decent hold, but way too late. 37.3% drop for a $5.6 million basically weekend and a $56.9 million domestic total. Star Wars, The Mandalorian, and Grogu also putting up a decent hold too late. It dropped 18.8%. Bringing in $3.9 million for a $171.7 million domestic total. At number 8 is a horror movie that I've been hyping since January, Leviticus. I put up a review, both spoiler and non-spoiler, here on the channel yesterday if you want to check that out. The Neon release brought in $2.7 million, which is about what you would expect from a Neon horror film that's not really breaking out into the mainstream. So, on a personal level, I wish it'd done better. But for a film that was acquired for about $5 million out of Sundance, the budget was even lower. That's not terrible. At number 9 is a movie that cost quite a bit more, The Death of Robin Hood, which opened to $2.6 million. And then spending a 9th week in the top 10, we have Michael, which brought in another $2.18 million. Its domestic total now at $367.9 million. Dropping out of the top 10, we have The Furious, which was in the top 10 for 1 week. I did finally get a chance to see it this past weekend, and I really, really enjoyed it. What a great action movie that was. Stop That Train out after 1 week, and the BTS World Tour live viewing of their Busan concert, not surprising since it was a live event, also out after 1 week. Looking at the biggest theater count changes this past weekend, for a second consecutive week, The Breadwinner leads the way, losing 1,204 theaters. It's now in 802. Masters of the Universe lost a big chunk of theaters, 1,160 of them. It's still in 2,517. Pressure lost most of its remaining theaters, 989. It's still in 351. Michael lost a chunk of theaters. It lost 822. It's still in 1,434. And Scary Movie also shed a pretty big chunk of theaters. It lost 779. It's still in 2,725. This is what the week-to-week box office looks like for 2026 versus 2025. And as I queued up here on the channel last week on Charts with Dan, we had a massive increase for this weekend versus the same weekend last year. It was an 82.6% increase. Summer 2026 has been ahead of summer 2025 almost every week, with a massive increase this past weekend. And I think we're going to be above 2025 again next weekend, but not by as much. I'm going to be interested to see once we get to the end of this month and I'm able to crunch the numbers, just how far ahead June 2026 was from June 2025. But a great and continued, really sustained recovery at the box office this year. All right, let's take a look at some of the movies that are in the top 10, and we will start with the number one movie, which is Toy Story 5. First of all, it had the biggest opening weekend domestically for any movie this year at $160 million estimated. That comes in above the Super Mario Galaxy movie, which, of course, as we've mentioned, opened on a Wednesday. Michael was in third, followed by The Mandalorian and Grogu. Backrooms now is the fifth best opening for any movie this year at $81.4 million. Then we have Project Hail Mary, The Devil Wears Prada 2, Scream 7, Scary Movie, and Hoppers. Supergirl increasingly looking like it may not be on this list when we're talking about it next week, but we'll see where it shakes out. As far as opening weekends this decade for the 2020s, Toy Story 5 had the seventh best opening for any film, right behind Barbie and a Minecraft movie. And if the estimates are off by even just a little bit, if it can get up to $162.7 million, it'll be the fifth biggest opening for a movie this decade. The top five right now belong to Spider-Man No Way Home at $260.1 million back in 2021, followed by Deadpool and Wolverine, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and Black Panther Wakanda Forever. So 4 MCU films. And if the pre-sales for Spider-Man Brand New Day are accurate, then we could see 5 MCU films here on this list by the end of the summer. The rest of the top 10, by the way, Inside Out 2, Wicked for Good, and the Super Mario Brothers movie. And Toy Story 5 also put up the third best opening unadjusted for inflation in the month of June, behind only Incredibles 2, which opened to $182.6 million, and Jurassic World, which opened to $208.8 million back in June of 2015. It comes in ahead of Inside Out 2, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, Jurassic World Dominion, Finding Dory, Man of Steel. Once you include those preview grosses in the opening weekend, that's why my number's a little bit different. Some sites break out the preview grosses. I put them in the opening weekend like we do now. Toy Story 5 in 9th place, and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse in 10th place. Once you do adjust those numbers for inflation, though, as of right now, Toy Story 5 is out of the all-time top 10 as far as June opening weekends. It would have to break $166.5 million to hit that number 10 spot, which is where Inside Out 2 is right now. Jurassic World Dominion is in 9th place. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban opened to an adjusted total of $172.2 million back in 2004. Then we have Toy Story 3, Transformers Revenge of the Fallen back in 2009 at $173.7 million adjusted for inflation, and that was a Wednesday opener. That's just how massive that movie was. Finding Dory's in 5th place. Man of Steel at $194 million adjusted is in 4th place, with Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom in 3rd, Incredibles 2 in 2nd, and the original Jurassic World back in 2015 in 1st place with just over $300 million adjusted for inflation. As far as animated films, Toy Story 5 had the second best opening ever for an animated film, behind only Incredibles 2. That's really the story for Toy Story 5. It was Pixar's best opening ever, except for Incredibles 2. It comes in ahead of Inside Out 2, the Super Mario Brothers movie, Moana 2, Finding Dory, the Super Mario Galaxy movie earlier this year, Frozen 2, Shrek the Third, and Toy Story 4. And when you adjust for inflation, Toy Story 5 had the 10th best opening ever for an animated film. Incredibles 2 is at number 1 with $244 million adjusted for inflation, followed by Shrek the Third and Shrek 2. So Shrek with 2 films in the adjusted list. Finding Dory's in 4th place, with Frozen 2 in 5th place, Toy Story 3 in 6th place, Minions in 7th place, Inside Out 2 in 8th place, and of course we have Super Mario Brothers there in 9th place. Looking at just the Toy Story franchise, this is interesting. I've talked about these staircase franchises before. The John Wick films, or at least the main ones starring Keanu Reeves, also have this pattern where each movie opened bigger than the one before. So Toy Story opened to $29.1 million back in 1995. Toy Story 2 opened to $57.3 million. Toy Story 3 was at $110.3 million. Toy Story 4 at $120.9 million. And Toy Story 5 at $160 million. It's very rare to find a franchise. There are a handful of them maybe, where each sequel opened bigger than the last one. When you adjust for inflation, it screws up the pattern just a little bit. That puts Toy Story 3 out ahead at $173.1 million, a little bit ahead of Toy Story 5 at $160 million, but it stays ahead of Toy Story 4 back in 2019. Toy Story 2 opens to an adjusted number of $130.4 million back in 1999, and that's with a Wednesday opening and a weekend in limited release. And then the original Toy Story opened to $63.6 million adjusted back in 1995. 5, again with an opening on Wednesday. Those were two Thanksgiving movies before the franchise went into the summer movie season. This was the second best opening ever in the history of Pixar, behind Incredibles 2. Toy Story 5 comes in about $6 million ahead of Inside Out 2's number a couple of summers ago. Finding Dory and Toy Story 4 round out the top 5. And you can see, just for comparison, this year's Hoppers had the 22nd best opening for a Pixar movie. So that is the value of sequels. And it's why Pixar keeps making them, because they are the ones that people pay to go see. Hoppers was very well received, but the huge gulf between the opening of those two films just goes to show why Pixar is leaning into that sequel strategy. Adjusted for inflation, Toy Story 5 had the 5th best opening in Pixar history, behind Inside Out 2, Toy Story 3, Finding Dory, and Incredibles 2. It comes in just ahead of Toy Story 4 and Finding Nemo. And you can see Hoppers there at number 26 on the list, ahead of Elemental and Elio. And even when you look at final domestic gross, Toy Story 5 is already ahead of 6 Pixar movies. So it made more in one weekend than 6 Pixar films did in their entire domestic run. Those 6 films are Elemental, Cars 3, The Good Dinosaur, Lightyear, Elio, and Onward. I know some people asked me if I thought that Lightyear's performance was going to hurt Toy Story 5, and my answer was, I don't think most people even remember that Lightyear exists. Hoppers actually has a final domestic total of $166 million, so Toy Story 5 very nearly made in one weekend what Hoppers did in its entire run, and Toy Story 5 is going to rocket up this list pretty quickly. Adjusted for inflation, Toy Story has outgrossed 3 Pixar films already domestically: Lightyear, Onward, and Elio, and of course it is right behind Hoppers. Incredibles 2, with the highest gross ever for a Pixar film adjusted for inflation at over $800 million. That was such a huge movie back in 2018, and inflation has done a number on these grosses. Let's not take that out of account either. Inflation, we're not in the best place right now, and that does boost a lot of these numbers. And that brings us to our member poll for last week. I asked members here on the channel what Pixar movie that doesn't have a sequel or an announced sequel should get one. And the winner was pretty clear. WALL-E brought in 47 votes ahead of the second place film Ratatouille, which brought in 37 votes. A Bug's Life, one of the early Pixar films, comes in third place with 20 votes, followed by Brave with 14 votes, Onward with 12 votes, Turning Red with 10 votes, Soul got 9 votes, Elemental and Hoppers got 8 votes apiece, Luca and Up got 6 votes apiece, and bringing up the rear were Elio with 2 votes and The Good Dinosaur with 2 votes. Not really a surprise there. So WALL-E, according to members of the channel, is the Pixar movie that should get a sequel. And that also brings us to this week's member poll question. Given Toy Story 5's strong box office and positive reception from audiences and critics, do you think there should be a Toy Story 6? Yes or no? A lot of people were pessimistic going into this one. They didn't think that it could pull it off. And most people liked the movie better than I did. I enjoyed it, but I would say based on the reactions that I've read to my review, it seems like the majority of people liked it even more. So given that, do you think there should be another one? You can vote right now, and I will reveal the results on next week's Charts with Dan. So I want to talk a little bit about Obsession. We're actually going to talk quite a bit about Obsession, and I know that some people are tired of hearing about it, but this is truly one of the best box office runs of all time, and so I think it's worth devoting time to on the show. And what I want to talk about this week is its run in totality. As I mentioned, right now, Obsession is about $4 million behind The Devil Wears Prada 2, which is currently the #1 movie of the summer. Now, by the end of next weekend, Toy Story 5, in all likelihood, I mean, almost certainly will have surpassed both of those movies to be the #1 movie of the summer. But Obsession has been performing really well on weekdays. Devil Wears Prada 2 is basically through its entire run. So I think it is also almost certain that for 2 or 3 days during the week before Toy Story 5 passes it, Obsession will be the highest grossing film of the summer, which is absolutely crazy considering that it is a micro-budget film. And it also has had box office success in a way that is really kind of most comparable to something like K-pop Demon Hunters on streaming. It didn't start huge, but it has had sustained performance over a number of weeks. So let's break down just how a movie like Obsession is able to, after 6 weekends of release, pass a big blockbuster from Disney and become the number one movie of the summer, even if it's just for a few days. First of all, let's talk about how Obsession has almost caught The Devil Wears Prada 2 in real time. So this is both movies and their cumulative gross over the release period. So Devil Wears Prada 2 has been out for 52 days. Obsession came out 2 weeks after The Devil Wears Prada 2 hit theaters. So you can see for those first 14 days that The Devil Wears Prada 2 was putting up really impressive grosses, a big surge on its first 3 days. You can see that second weekend surge over Mother's Day. And by the time Obsession opened, it already had $150 million banked. And yet it's about to get lapped, and you can see it's because The Devil Wears Prada 2 followed that very familiar curve we see with most movies, where it has a big surge at the beginning and then it flattens out over time. Whereas Obsession has had a steadily rising curve. It's not just that it's been doing good on weekends, it's been doing good on weekdays as well. The drop-offs have been very small. And so it looks a lot closer to a rocket launching. It's not straight vertical, but it has a much less pronounced curve than a movie like The Devil Wears Prada 2. And so because the holds have been so good, it's been able to close that gap little by little over the last 4 weeks or so. This is what both movies look like through 38 days of release, which is where Obsession is right now. And you can see that it has already passed where Devil Wears Prada 2 was on its 38th day of release, which means it is on track to not just pass it, but have a final domestic gross far beyond it. And again, you can see the differing structure. Devil Wears Prada 2, much steeper toward the beginning of its release cycle, but Obsession slowly and steadily not flattening out and continuing that ascent, and now having passed it already if you're talking about day for day cumulative gross. So this is looking at both movies through 38 days of release with how much they made each day individually. So this isn't cumulative. This is how much they brought in every single day. And you can see that on its first day of release, The Devil Wears Prada 2 made about $34 million in one day, whereas Obsession made about $8 million. And for The Devil Wears Prada 2's first 10 days, it made more every single day than Obsession did at the same point in its release cycle. But you can see that after day 10, Obsession has made more money than The Devil Wears Prada 2 did. And again, it's because it has been able to sustain that release, to sustain the buzz and the word of mouth. And when you add up 28 straight days of outgrossing another movie, when that movie was at the same point in its release cycle, again, that's how you catch up on the final gross. And this was a really interesting chart for me. This is a chart of the number of days that a movie has spent at number one at the domestic box office in 2026. So Super Mario Galaxy spent 23 days at number one. Avatar Fire and Ash since January 1st spent 20 days at number one. Michael was number one for 13 days. Project Hail Mary, Send Help, and Hoppers were all number one for 12 days. And then down at the bottom, Wuthering Heights, The Devil Wears Prada 2, and Obsession have all spent 10 days as the number one movie at the domestic box office. But there are two key things when we talk about Obsession having 10 days at number one at the domestic box office. First of all, it is the only one of these movies that did not open at number one at the domestic box office. But more interestingly, all 10 of Obsession's days at number one domestically have been weekdays. It has never spent a weekend day at number one, but it's done so well during the week that it's been able to get 10 days as the number one movie domestically. And again, that is how it has closed the gap. It doesn't just perform on weekends, it performs well on weekdays. It outperforms some of these big studio films on weekdays, and it does incredibly well Friday through Sunday. All of these patterns are very abnormal, and that's why I wanted to take several minutes to talk about them today, because it is highly unlikely that we're going to see anything like this again in the near future. We'll see it again at some point, and so as a guy who likes to do charts and numbers, if you think I'm going to pass up the chance to show you these numbers, you're crazy. Hopefully, if you don't like this, you've been able to skip ahead. I'll put it as its own chapter. But I think it's very, very interesting. And just one more quick thing about Obsession, or I guess two more. First of all, these are the highest grossing movies domestically that have never spent a weekend at number one at the box office. Right now, Obsession is at number 6. And in the next few days, it'll pass both Alvin and the Chipmunks movies to be number 4 on this list. And we'll see where it settles out. And these are also the highest grossing horror films of all time domestically, unadjusted unadjusted for inflation. I talked last week about a new system I set up that put Beetlejuice at number 2, but I just couldn't sit with that. So I decided to use the system. If I need to disqualify a movie from being a horror film based on that system, I will. But I'm also using veto power if there's a movie that does qualify that I think blatantly is not a horror film. So right now, Obsession is the 6th highest grossing horror movie of all time domestically, unadjusted for inflation, behind The Exorcist, I Am Legend, Sinners, Jaws, and It. It's ahead of It Chapter 2, World War Z, A Quiet Place, and The Conjuring Last Rites, although that film will probably come off this list pretty soon because Backrooms is very close to passing The Conjuring Last Rites as far as total domestic box office. So we could have 2 of the 10 highest grossing horror films of all time domestically come out in the summer of 2026. That's pretty cool. We also have a horror-adjacent film in theaters right now, which is Scary Movie, the parody film of the Scream franchise and a bunch of other movies. It has now overtaken Scary Movie 4 to be the 3rd highest-grossing film in the franchise at $97.6 million. If it can get $13 million more dollars at the box office, 12.5 really, it'll pass Scary Movie 3, but it will not pass the original Scary Movie, which came out in the year 2000. And looking at parody film grosses, 2026's Scary Movie is now number 6, ahead of Scary Movie 4, The Naked Gun 2.5, Young Frankenstein, and Airplane. And again, if it can pass Scary Movie 3, it'll take number 5 on this list. We looked at the inflation-adjusted list last week. Scary Movie is not on it, so we're not going to look at it again. Suffice it to say, Leslie Nielsen and Mel Brooks are the kings of the parody movie. Masters of the Universe is still in the top 10 at the domestic box office, although it has not had a very good box office run. And I briefly wanted to talk about a news story that you might have seen that was run by Forbes. This is not one of those, kind of clickbait, questionable movie news sites. This is Forbes, which you would think would be a reputable publication. And I saw it aggregated, I saw it shared on social media, etc. And I wanted to address it. The article says, Masters of the Universe set for sequel. Despite dismal box office, which if you're just looking at the headline makes it seem like there is officially going to be a Masters of the Universe sequel. But that is not the case, not right now, and definitely not when this article was written. So this is some of the text of the article. It says, Masters of the Universe seems set to get a sequel despite only grossing $89.9 million at the worldwide box office, as its ingenious business model gives it a second chance to reach fans of the beloved 1980s action figure franchise and cartoon that the movie is based on. Ultimately, Amazon won't judge Masters of the Universe on its box office haul, but on the fact that it gives it exclusive content in a key genre. The movie is a hit with fans, so it has significant power to drive streaming subscriptions. Subscribers don't pay to watch specific movies and instead get access to all of them along with the other content on Amazon Prime. This makes it difficult to say how much streaming revenue and therefore profit is generated by individual movies, so even Amazon may never know if Masters of the Universe makes a profit or a loss, and it is perfectly happy with that. The movie plugs a crucial gap in its content slate and stands a good chance of attracting subscribers as it is a fan favorite. So first things first, the article really isn't even about a sequel to Masters of the Universe at all. It mentions it very briefly at the top, but most of it is about the revenue model for Masters of the Universe. There's no quote from Amazon in there about there being a sequel or the possibilities of a sequel. It seems like they based that on the fact that Travis Knight said, well, yeah, we set up a sequel in this movie, but I mean, a lot of movies set up sequels that don't end up having them. So this was, especially on a headline basis, I think clickbait of the highest order, supporting an article that doesn't even really confirm that a sequel is under consideration, and then goes on to address the whole revenue portion of Masters of the Universe. And this is also what I think is an interesting argument, again, because Amazon itself isn't really backing this up with anything. This is a writer kind of making a supposition about Masters of the Universe, and that supposition is that Masters of the Universe might get a sequel even though it lost a horrendously large amount of money at the box office. And the reasoning behind that is because it's content. And this is just kind of a really weird article to me because I'm not going to deny, I'm sure that there is calculus at Amazon that says that Masters of the Universe is very valuable as a streaming asset, but it seems to be presenting as news a supposition that it's going to be so valuable to Amazon that they'll greenlight a sequel that nobody really knows anything about. And even the reasoning behind that, the idea of, well, they might not know if it ever turns a profit or a loss, and they don't really care. That's kind of a crazy thing to say. I mean, Amazon may not care how Masters of the Universe turns a profit, but I can promise you they definitely care if it does somehow turn a profit. So this is an example of, because I saw this shared on a few different sites and people commenting as if it was actual confirmation that there might be a Masters of the Universe sequel, and there might be, but we have not received that yet from Amazon. And I think it's a lesson, as I try to do here on the show from time to time, to look beyond the headline and actually read the article, because even in the body of the article itself, I don't think that there was much news. I don't think there was really any news. And I think it's kind of a questionable supposition that was even being made. It's not really on the basis of anything, but hey, it had a big headline and I'm sure it got a lot of clicks. So mission accomplished on that front. But again, I feel like you should have a responsibility to maybe do a little bit more. So moving on from this past weekend's top 10, the big release this upcoming weekend is Supergirl, which is the movie I'm traveling to see today. The review embargo lifts on Wednesday morning. Take that as you will. So that's when you will see my review of the film. But the original Supergirl film is the inspiration behind this week's Charts with Dan trivia question. 1984's Supergirl, which was not a big box office hit, opened on Thanksgiving weekend and shared the top 5 with 2 movies starring iconic 80s action stars. Supergirl was number 1. 2 of the other movies in the top 5 starred 80s action stars, famous ones. And I want to know, what 2 movies were in the top 5 with Supergirl? I'll give you a second to think about it. One of them is probably pretty easy. If you don't want to know the answer, pause, because I'm about to reveal it. The answer is The Terminator, of course, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was in week 5 of its release. And Missing in Action, starring Chuck Norris, which was in week 2 of its release. Both of those movies, bigger hits than Supergirl was. And we'll see if this version of Supergirl can outdo the original. All right, let's check in on the summer box office so far this year. As I mentioned, The Devil Wears Prada 2 is number 1 for now at $219.3 million, but closing quickly is Obsession at $215.8 million. And I think probably by Tuesday or Wednesday, it should be number 1 at the summer box office, but then on Friday or Saturday, it will get passed by Toy Story 5. Still, what an amazing story at the summer box office this year. Backrooms moves up 1 spot to number 3 at $175.1 million. The Mandalorian and Grogu moves down 1 spot to number 4 at $171.7 million. And that also means that currently the number 2 and number 3 movies of the summer were made for a combined budget of less than $11 million. Toy Story 5 enters the chart at number 5 at $160 million. It'll be moving up that very quickly. Scary Movie is down 1 spot to number 6. Mortal Kombat 2 is down 1 spot to number 7. Disclosure Day moves up 1 spot to number 8. The Sheep Detectives is down 2 spots to number 9. Masters of the Universe is clinging on to number 10 at $56.9 million, down 2 spots from last week. And The Amazing Digital Circus, The Last Act, is out of the summer top 10. And just as a reminder for my summer predictions, I picked Toy Story 5 to be the number 1 movie of the summer, although, again, Spider-Man Brand New Day, the pre-sale numbers on that movie are insane, so it's very possible that I backed the wrong horse there and it'll be number 2. But still, the point is, it's doing very well. The Devil Wears Prada 2 I picked to be number 6 for the summer. It's currently at number 1. Mandalorian and Grogu I picked to be 7th place for the summer. It's currently number 4. Scary Movie I picked to be the 9th highest grossing movie of the summer. It's currently at number 6. And Disclosure Day I picked to be the 10th highest grossing movie of the summer. It is currently at number 8. One of those movies is not going to make it, I'm pretty sure. Or maybe they both will, but Supergirl, I think, is definitely not going to make it. I think that might be my first official fatality for the summer. I picked it to be the 8th highest grossing film, but I also don't want to count the chickens before they hatch or don't hatch. So we'll see what it does at the box office. But one of these movies is turning red in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Still, generally, I'm pretty happy with my predictions, and we'll see how the summer continues to play out from here. All right, let's look away now from the domestic box office and take a look at the top 5 movies internationally and the top 10 worldwide. Thankfully, ComScore did update their worldwide numbers this week, so I can bring you this full segment. First of all, these were the top 5 movies in all territories outside of the US and Canada. Toy Story 5 comes in at $152 million. Disclosure Day comes in at $18.7 million. Dear You, which continues to be the obsession of China this summer, comes in at $12.48 million. Then we have Backrooms at $12.28 million. Chiwetel Ejiofor is looking up at the amazing performance of Dear You, perhaps bonding with that film over the fact that they're both lower budget films that have done very well. And Michael, still rounding out the top 5 internationally at $11.5 million. When you take those international numbers, you combine them with the domestic numbers, we get our top 10 worldwide. I've included the drop-offs from the movies that I had figures for last week, but I don't have every movie. Of course, Toy Story 5, the number one movie in the world, with a $312 million opening weekend. That is banana pants crazy. Disclosure Day dropped 61.6% in its second weekend of release to bring in $35.7 million and $160.4 million total worldwide so far. Obsession dropped 26.2% worldwide to bring in another $25.1 million. It's now at $333 million worldwide. So more than 333 times its production budget. Backrooms dropped 15.7% for a $19.5 million weekend. It's now over $300 million worldwide. Scary Movie dropped 57.3%, but is now over $200 million globally. And again, that movie was made for around $35-40 million. So that's going to be a very profitable film. Michael brought in $13.7 million as it continues to reach for that billion-dollar mark. It's at $959.6 million. Keep on chugging. It's going to be really close. Dear You's at $12.48 million for a $272.2 million total. Again, all of that money made in China. At number 8 is a film from India called Cocktail 2. It is not a sequel to the Tom Cruise movie. It is a sequel or a spiritual sequel to a 2012 film from India. It brought in $8.7 million over the weekend. I Know Who You Are, which is a film from China, came in at $8.6 million. It was released in conjunction with the Dragon Boat Festival holiday in China. And Masters of the Universe hanging on there at number 10 at $8.4 million. It's now at $101.9 million globally. And probably next week or the week after, we're going to look at the profitability for that film. As far as the biggest opening weekends of the year, right now, Toy Story 5 comes in just behind the Super Mario Galaxy movie at $312 million to Super Mario's $314.1 million. But if the finals are even just a little above the estimates, it could snag that number 1 spot. And if it does, I'll talk about it on next week's show. Still, those two movies are by far the two biggest openings globally of the year, with The Devil Wears Prada 2, Michael, and Pegasus 3 rounding out the top 5. Toy Story 5 has now also outgrossed 6 other Pixar films worldwide. It's ahead of Lightyear, Elio, Onward, and then Soul, Luca, and Turning Red, which are not on the domestic chart because they didn't get proper domestic releases, but they are on the worldwide chart because they were released in theaters outside of the United States and made enough that I think they should be listed on that chart. So Toy Story 5 ahead of all of those films and will soon be jumping ahead of The Good Dinosaur, A Bug's Life, the original Toy Story, and Hoppers, which had a global gross of $372 million. All right, let's take a look now at what I call some of our specialty charts, and we'll start with the top per theater averages for this past weekend. Toy Story 5 put up a great average, but it actually comes in behind a movie called Maddie's Secret, which played at one theater in New York and brought in $58,200 in that theater. It is a comedy written and directed by John Early. He plays a food critic named Maddie, who also has bulimia, and I was reading that they had Q&A sessions and everything else that really led to basically every showtime being sold out at that one theater in New York. But look at Toy Story 5. This is a great number for a movie that would have opened in like 4 theaters. It made $36,158 per theater in each of its 4,425 theaters. So a lot of very happy managers and probably a lot of very tired employees after this past weekend. Peter Asher, Everywhere Man, brought in $9,500 per theater in one theater. It is a documentary about the British music producer and manager. In fourth place in 3 theaters was Rose of Nevada, which made $8,312 per theater. It's a movie about a boat that disappeared decades ago, which reappears and takes its new crew back in time. And then Obsession rounds out the top 5, bringing in $4,651 per theater in each of its over 3,000 theaters. And Maddie's Secret and Toy Story 5 each put up one of the best per theater averages of the year. The top average of the year was The Moment back in January, which made over $100,000 per theater in 4 theaters, followed by Pillion in February, which brought in $60,000 per theater in 4 theaters. Then we have Maggie's Secret, with the third best average of the year, followed by Toy Story 5 and Silent Friend, which rounds out the top 5 at just over $35,000 per theater in 2 theaters. So Toy Story 5, the only one of these movies that was in wide release, super wide, saturated release. All the other ones opening in 4 theaters or less. These are the top films in limited release this past weekend, which I define as fewer than 1,000 theaters. At number 1 was Girls Like Girls, which opened in just over 500 theaters and brought in $1.6 million. It got really good reviews. I'll probably have a chance, or hopefully have a chance, to check it out at some point this year. Ma Inti Bangaram comes in with $1.1 million in an unknown number of theaters. It is a film from India about an assassin who's pulled back into her old life. What a novel concept. Greg Allman, The Music of My Soul, a documentary about the musician Greg Allman, opened in 199 theaters and brought in $374,000. Then we have Maddie's Secret in its one theater, which brought in $58,200, and Rosa, Nevada, which brought in a total of $24,937 in 3 theaters. This is what the 2026 annual domestic box office looks like. The Super Mario Galaxy movie still number 1. We'll see if Toy Story 5 makes a serious run at that spot at $429.6 million. Michael in second place at $367.9 million, followed by Project Hail Mary, The Devil Wears Prada 2, and Obsession. Of course, as we mentioned, Obsession is going to jump up over Devil Wears Prada 2 at some point soon. Backrooms moves up 2 spots from last week to be the number 6 movie of the year, with The Mandalorian and Grogu staying at number 7, Hoppers moving down 2 spots to number 8, Toy Story 5 entering the chart as the 9th highest grossing domestic film of the year, and Scream 7 at number 10, down 1 spot from last week. GOAT is out of the 2026 domestic top 10. And these are the top 10 movies of the year worldwide. At number 10 is Backrooms, which is down 1 spot to make room for Toy Story 5, which is new on the list at number 9. Wuthering Heights drops off of the list. The Mandalorian and Grogu is down to number 8 for the year. Obsession has now officially outgrossed a Star Wars film at the worldwide box office, as well as the domestic box office. Hoppers is at number 6, with Pegasus 3 at number 5, Devil Wears Prada 2 at number 4, Project Hail Mary at number 3, then a big gap before we get to Michael at number 2, and the Super Mario Galaxy movie, the only movie thus far of 2026 to cross $1 billion, although both Michael and Toy Story 5 are going to make a serious run at that. So those are all the numbers I have for you this week as far as the box office goes. Before we go, let's take a look at the latest numbers in the world of streaming. And we'll start with Netflix's latest numbers. The newest ones will come out tomorrow. This covers the week of June 8th through the 14th. The number 1 most watched program on Netflix was the Netflix movie Office Romance, starring Jennifer Lopez, which brought in another 24.57 million views. Then we have the Netflix original series Teach You a Lesson from South Korea, which brought in 21.14 million views, a big jump from last week. At number 3 is the Netflix original movie Maternal Instinct at 14.97 million views. It is a true crime documentary because, of course, they do so well on Netflix. At number 4 is the movie Colors of Evil Black, which is a Polish crime film, crime again, that is a follow-up to Colors of Evil Red. It brought in just over 14 million views. The Marked Woman is at number 5 at 13.82 million views, followed by The Witness at just over 10 million views. Michael Jackson, The Verdict, dropping to just over 7 million views. The animated film Swapped at 5.71 million views. The Murder of Rachel Nichols at number 9 at 5.38 million views. And Booth Bangla, an Indian film that hit theaters earlier this year, at 4.86 million views. These are the most watched programs on Netflix in 2026. War Machine currently number 1, but Swapped has moved up to number 2 on the list at 120.41 million views. Apex moves down to 3rd place. K-Pop Demon Hunters moves back up to 4th place, and that's because it doesn't drop off the charts. It actually just celebrated 52 weeks on the top 10 Netflix English language film chart. It has not dropped off of the Netflix charts for an entire year. Again, when we're just talking about the top 10 English language films, it's dropped on and off the overall top 10 a few times. Of course, no movie has ever done that, and it really doesn't show any signs of stopping. And that's why these numbers are so high, because we're not missing any. It's on the chart every single week. I have the numbers for every single week of release. Right now, according to the numbers we have, it is the 4th most watched program just in 2026 at 116.62 million views. That moves The Rip down to number 5. Bridgerton Season 4, His and Hers, Thrash, The Crash, and People We Meet on Vacation, rounding out the top 10. Let's take a look now at the latest numbers from Nielsen. Now, this covers U.S. domestic streaming only, and they're delayed by about a month because that's how it works over at Nielsen. So this covers the week of May 18th through the 24th, and we'll start with the most watched streaming movies. At number 1 is the Netflix true crime documentary The Crash at 19.66 million hours watched, followed by GOAT at 13.98 million hours watched. Then we have the John Krasinski Amazon original film Jack Ryan Ghost War, which debuts at number 3. It's kind of low considering how many people watch the show, but I think some of the luster wore off over the years. 13.48 million hours watched for Jack Ryan Ghost War. Remarkably Bright Creatures comes in 4th place at 6.56 million hours watched, followed by Swapped. Stolen Baby, which I believe was the Lifetime movie at 5.43 million hours watched. Ladies First on Netflix, which was a Netflix original film that did not debut close to number 1. We'll see if there's a viewership surge in week number 2 at 4.76 million hours watched. Nope made its debut over on Netflix and brought in 3.71 million hours watched. Zootopia 2 returns to the charts on Disney Plus at 3.2 million hours watched. And hey, we were just talking about this movie. K-pop Demon Hunters also back in the top 10 at 2.78 million hours watched. These were the most watched streaming shows from May 18th through the 24th. At number 1 was Nemesis on Netflix. It moves up to the number 1 spot at 21.83 million hours watched. At number 2 is The Burrows, which debuted to over 20 million hours watched, but was actually just canceled this past week, officially by Netflix. Some have speculated that because it was executive produced by the Duffer Brothers, who decided to leave Netflix, that the network decided to maybe get rid of one of their shows. Who knows? But yeah, a number 2 debut for The Burrows, a show that's already been canceled. At number 3 is The Boys. Now, this was going into its finale week, but it was only number 3 on the chart at 17.88 million hours watched, so maybe a cooling of fan enthusiasm for that show. Bluey's at number 4, Grey's Anatomy at number 5, The Big Bang Theory at number 6, Dutton Ranch on Paramount Plus charts at number 7. Then we have Off Campus on Amazon Prime Video. It makes the overall top 10 for the first time at 11.5 million hours watched. La Brea is at number 9, and Family Guy is at number 10. And The Burrows was able to put up the second best debut here in the U.S. for a new streaming series at just over 20 million hours watched. It comes in only behind His and Hers back in January of this year. But again, it's not just about the opening numbers in the first week or even the second week. There are many things at play when it comes to whether a streamer is going to renew a series or not. And The Burrows, despite putting up all right numbers domestically, didn't make the cut. These were the most watched shows when you look at it by watch time per available episode. So take the number of hours that were watched, divided by the number of episodes you can watch. That's how we hit this number. Dutton Ranch tops the charts again with just over 4 million hours of watch time per episode for each of its 3 episodes. Nemesis comes in second place at 2.73 million hours per episode, followed by The Burrows in third place at 2.5 million hours per episode. Off Campus moves up to fourth place at 1.44 million hours per episode, followed by Worst Ex Ever at number 5, The Wonderfools at number 6, Marshalls at number 7, Boys, now with its full episode run of 40 episodes at 447,000 hours per episode, La Brea at number 9, and Your Friends and Neighbors at number 10. And Dutton Ranch put up another one of the best watch time per episode performances we've seen this year. It was the 4th best performance on a per episode basis of 2026 at just over 4 million. The original 2 episodes brought in about 6 million hours of watch time per episode last week. It's there at number 2. His and Hers bookends this at number 1 and number 5, back from earlier in the year. And Reality Check, Inside America's Top Model, is right there in the middle at number 3. That's very symmetrical how these shows are lined up. I never really noticed that till now. So those are all the numbers I have for you this week. I know it was a lot. Before we go, I just wanted to draw your attention to a few things that you might want to catch both in theaters and at home this upcoming week. First of all, tomorrow on Tuesday, there are a few movies that you'll be able to watch at home through premium video on demand and digital rentals and purchase. One of them is Boots Riley's latest film, I Love Boosters. Billie Eilish, Hit Me Hard and Soft, the concert film directed by James Cameron, will also be available to watch at home starting tomorrow. And Tuner, which I really liked out of Sundance, is also available to watch at home starting tomorrow. On Wednesday, you can watch Avatar, Fire and Ash, so maybe you could double feature with Billie Eilish, 2 James Cameron movies back to back. It'll be making its debut on Disney Plus about 6 months after it opened in theaters. I'm fine with that gap. Also on Wednesday on Netflix is a really interesting sounding movie. It's called In the Hand of Dante. It stars Oscar Isaac, who plays both Dante and an author hired to authenticate a Dante manuscript. The story also involves the mafia, and the cast for this movie is crazy. Oscar Isaac, Al Pacino, John Malkovich, Gal Gadot, Gerard Butler, Jason Momoa, and Martin Scorsese. I might just check this one out of sheer curiosity. On Thursday, we have another Avatar that you can watch at home, but this is Avatar: The Last Airbender Season 2, the second season of the live-action remake show from Netflix. Remember that first season about 28 months ago? Well, it's back for a second season. It's crazy to me, the gaps between these shows. I know that there were strikes and everything else having to do with it, but I don't even remember what happened in the first season. I'll check it out. If I decide I want to talk about it, maybe I'll make a video. If not, it'll just be another thing that comes and goes. Also debuting on Thursday is The Bear. The final season will be available, all episodes available for streaming on Hulu. I am curious to see how the show wraps up. I actually have liked the show throughout. Not that every season is equally great, but I've liked every season. Then on Friday, of course, the major release is Supergirl, which is hitting theaters nationwide. You can check out my review of that movie on Wednesday. Also opening on Friday is Jackass, Best and Last, which is being advertised as the final Jackass film, featuring both new stunts as well as a look back at some of their most memorable stunts. I've got to be honest, I don't care, highbrow, lowbrow, it doesn't matter what you think. There are few things in this world that make me laugh more than Jackass and Jackass movies and clips from the show. So I am definitely going to be watching this in theaters because I love Jackass movies. I don't care who knows it. If you're looking more on the streaming route this upcoming weekend, Little Brother will be debuting on Netflix. It stars John Cena and Eric Andre as brothers. I mean, that's a pretty appealing premise just on its own. And also debuting on HBO Max on Friday is Undertone, which is a horror movie that played Sundance, then hit theaters, and will now be available to watch at home. Watch it with the best sound system you can because the sound design in that movie is really, really good. And that's everything I've got for you this week. For the few of you that are still here at the bitter end, thank you for watching. As I mentioned, you can stay tuned for reviews of Supergirl here on the channel, definitely this week, as well as whatever else strikes my fancy. If you're not subscribed, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. You can also become a member here on the channel, so you can vote in the polls, you get custom badges and emoji to use in the chat, and you get exclusive early access to some of my videos. You can check that out in the description below as well. But most of all, thank you for watching this video. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.